Hi you guys, if you guys have been following along with McGraw-Hill, we're still in chapter 9. I'm actually doing a part 2 of estimating fractions when we add or subtract. So this was a pretty big lesson, and I think the most important part is really just understanding how to round your fractions. Once you round them to a whole number, we're going to round all the fractions into a whole number, then you can easily add or subtract the whole numbers. That's easy cheesy, like 2 plus 3, which is 5. But in order to get those whole numbers, you got to figure out how to round. You have to round the fractions properly. So I'm going to show you that a couple different ways. So take your time and be sure that if you do have fraction tiles or, if you have fraction number lines, you can go ahead and get that out and just go ahead and write on there. That'll be easy for you. All right. So what are we doing? We're taking both of these fractions. So I have 6 and 7/10. I'm going to write it really big. I want to round this to the next whole number. So whenever you round a whole number, or round a fraction, it's going to be, okay, is 6 and 7/10, is it going to change into a 6? Or is it going to round up into a 7? That's what you're figuring out every time. How about my 1 and 1/5? 1 and 1/5. This is either going to round down to a 1, or it's going to round up to a 2, which is the next whole number. How do we figure out which to round it to? Because you do need to do this part correct. Well, you look at the fraction. The fraction is the piece that's connected, and this is the piece that's going to tell us how to round. I want you to think about it this way, just for this example. If I have 7 out of 10, I'm very close to 10 out of 10, right? If you think of 7 out of 10, what's the difference between 7 and 10? Isn't that only 3 away? Well, what would be the difference between 7 and 0? That would be 7 away. So I know this is going to round up to a 7. Now that's one way to look at it. What if I have 1 out of 5? Well, 1 out of 5 is way closer to 0 out of 5. It's further away to get 5 out of 5. So I know this is going to round down to a 1. And then you would take the operation, which is subtraction, and you would say, okay, what is 7 minus 1? And our answer would be a rounded answer of 6. Okay? Now, that was a very simple way, but I want to get in more depth of how we're rounding, and I always do that on a number line. So we're going to round each of these fractions, but showing you how we're doing that with a number line. Okay? So let's plot 6 and 7/10. So go ahead and draw out a number line. Our 6 is the whole that we're starting with, and then what would be the next whole? It would be a 7. Then look at what the denominator is. The denominator is a 10, so we're working with fractions of tenths, right? So we would have 1/10. What would be in the middle? I always like to do the middle piece. It would be 5/10, because 5 is half a 10. And then in between, you just need to plot the rest of them, right? So we'd have 2/10, 3/10, 4/10. 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, and 9/10. Now what would this be? Wouldn't it be 10 out of 10? But 10 out of 10 is a whole, so we don't need to write that. We're just writing, that's why we write down, okay, what's the next whole? It'd be a 7. Okay, now 6 is attached to all of these, right? 6 and a 10th, 6 and 2/10, 6, all the way down, because 6 and 10 out of 10, I want to show you this, is technically representing my 7. Why do I change it into a 7 though? Well, because what is 10 out of 10? That's a whole. 10 out of 10 is a whole. So together I have 6 and a whole. 6 plus 1 is 7. That's why this represents a 7, okay? It's the next whole number. All right, so let's go ahead, and now that we've plotted our number line, how did we do it? You take the whole number out front, write down what the next whole number is, and then fill in your fractions by what the denominator is. It was broken up into tenths, all right? Now plot the fraction you have, 7/10. 7/10 is right here, and then you're either going to round up to a 7 or round down to the 6. What is it closer to? You can eyeball it. You can see that it's closer to the 7, but you also know that 7/10 is bigger than the halfway mark. So if it's anywhere to the right of the halfway mark, or if it's bigger than a half, it's always going to round up. If it's anywhere over here to the left of the halfway mark, it's going to round to this, okay? So we did round that properly. That rounds to a 7. So now I need to figure out what is my 1/5, 1 1/5 round to. So I'm now going to see what is 1 1/5 round to. So I have a 1 at the bottom, or I'm sorry, at the left part, 1 whole. What would be down here? It would be a 2, because that would be the next whole. Now in between, I have fifths, because my denominator is a 5. So you need to break this up into fifths, so that would be 1, and then I'd have 1 1/5, 1 2/5, 1 3/5, 1 4/5. What would it be here? Well, wouldn't it be 1 5/5? But 1 5/5 is the same thing as 2, because a 5 out of a 5 is a whole, and 1 whole plus a whole is 2. So that's why we just write it as 2. That's the next whole number. Now, plot the point. Where is 1 1/5? 1 1/5 is right here. What is it closer to? Is it closer to a 1 or is it closer to the 2? If you eyeball it, it's definitely closer to the 1. So I know this is going to round to a 1. And if you take your number line, where's the halfway mark? Halfway is right about here. It's to the left of the half. If it's smaller than a half, it's always going to round down to this, okay? Now, we're going back to our original equation. We rounded this to a 7, we rounded this to a 1, and our operation was subtraction. What is 7 minus 1? The answer is 6, okay? So really what I want you guys to do is take your time when you are drawing your number lines, make sure you round properly, and then you are just subtracting and adding whole numbers, which I know you know how to do. All right, you guys, be sure you check out the part 1 of estimating fractions for more examples.